Warp is adding 1 million ARR every 10 days.
The rough size of our user base, which is, I think as of this month, there'll be close to 700,000 active developers who are using Warp.
AI agents, and specifically AI coding agents, are the #1 trend in product development right now.
One very, very powerful new primitive, which is intelligence.
How do you build a good agentic product? How do you code well with AI agents? Some people are making tons of money. Most people are getting lost in the shuffle. I'm so excited to share this conversation with CEO and founder of Warp, Lloyd.
What's particularly challenging, and you'll see this with Warp and with Claude and Cursor, and like everyone is trying to figure out how to price this stuff. And what's cool about this is when I go into this, I immediately get into the agent flow. Now I'm like probably for the first time, I'm seeing like, oh, wait a second, Warp can just like use an agent to fix my thing for me.
So as I previewed at the beginning, some people are making money with agents. You guys have figured out how to do it. Others are lost. So who's actually winning, and what business model innovations work for agentic products?
The typical SaaS pricing mechanism of a fixed price per seat subscription, I think it doesn't work that well.
Wow, more than 19x growth in a single year. So you're really in that explosion that's happening.
If you are in a business where you are less about like improving productivity, but you have a more measurable outcome where you charge for much closer to the value that's being provided.
How big is Warp? What revenue and usage numbers can you share with us? Really quickly, I think a crazy stat is that more than 50% of you listening are not subscribed. If you can subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple or Spotify podcasts, my commitment to you is that we'll continue to make this content better and better. And now on to today's episode. Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Aakash. It's awesome to be here.
How big is Warp? What revenue and usage numbers can you share with us?
So I can share our growth rate. So as you said in the intro, it's now over $1 million in ARR every 10 days, and that's accelerating. And that's up. You know, we just started monetizing Warp. Basically we're close to nothing at the start of the year. And so it's been very, very cool to see the acceleration. And then the other thing I can share is just like the rough size of our user base, which is, I think as of this month, there'll be, close to 700,000 active developers who are using Warp, which is pretty cool. And that's also growing quite quickly.
Insane numbers. And the revenue is up 19x this year?
Yeah. Or more, I think, at this point. Yeah.
Wow, more than 19x growth in a single year. So you're really in that explosion that's happening. We're seeing it with some other tools similar in the space, whether it's Lovable or Replit. What was the turning point for you guys from almost nothing to now this explosion?
Yeah, so it really had to do with finding the right interface for AI within the product. And so the history of Warp, just very briefly, is we started off as a reimagination of the terminal, so of the command line UI. And we spent a lot of time, building what we thought was like the most usable and accessible and powerful version of just doing command line work. And it turns out that interface is incredible for doing agentic work. And you started to see that at the beginning of this year with all of these like CLI-based agents that have come out. So things like Claude Code or Gemini CLI. And, we had actually, even before those tools came out, started to make it so that instead of using Warp as a terminal, you could use it to run agents. But it wasn't until we really went fully in on the agentic features and made them front and center, and even repositioned Warp from being a terminal into what we now call an agentic development environment. And we did that that launch in June, where we really started seeing the growth accelerate super quickly.
Wow, that's the power of building AI agent products well. You've been a CTO multiple times. You worked at Google for years. So you are very familiar with PMs and founders. For any PM or founder watching in 2025, how critical is understanding agentic AI? Are we at a learn this or get left behind moment?
I think so. I mean, I think it'd be hard for me to imagine building a product today and not thinking about how you can apply this technology to whatever problem you're solving. I would just be surprised if there's a problem out there that is a software problem where it wouldn't benefit from some amount of intelligence. And that's like really what I think of as like the thing that's changed, is that there's this sort of new primitive available where if you're someone building a product, you now, it used to be like if you're building a product, you could sort of pick like a database or external APIs that you want to rely on, or just like a whole technology stack for building it. And now there's this one very, very powerful new primitive, which is intelligence that you can have in your app. And so whether you're building a productivity app, you're building a consumer app, you're building something that's much more on like, for helping go to market people, like I think every kind of app out there at this point would benefit from having agentic features.
So let's get tactical, right? I promised our audience we'd reveal how to build good agentic products.
Yep.
Most people are building AI products that feel like gimmicks.
Right.
So what's your framework for identifying where AI agents add value versus where they're just tech for tech's sake?
Yeah, so I think it's like the same fundamentals of product development as if you're building an app in the world before agents apply if you're building with agents. And so you need to start with the problem, in my opinion. So like, what problem are you trying to solve for a user, for a customer? Is it a deep problem? Is it a nice to have problem? Once you've kind of identified that there is a problem that you want to solve, and in Warp's case, that problem is like, it takes a ton of time and is very expensive and hard to develop software. It's like a very like kind of general problem, but like that problems like that exist in a ton of different domains. You start with the problem, and then I think you start to explore the solution space, and you need some hypothesis around like, okay, I think that if I'm trying to solve this problem for some user, that if we inserted intelligence in this particular workflow, it might make that workflow faster, and that would be useful for people. And so like, I'm trying to think of a good hypothetical without just totally focusing on Warp. But like, let's say I'm building a calendaring app or something. It's like, it's probably useful to have some intelligence with when meetings are scheduled. It's probably be useful to have an LLM be able to like understand the patterns where you like to work or your coworkers are available, and factor that into the scheduling algorithm. And it used to be that for something like that, you would have to like code it as an algorithm. And what I mean by that is like, you would probably set up a bunch of specific rules, like this person likes things in the morning, that person likes meetings in the afternoon, this person doesn't want a meeting with more than 5 people or whatever. And what's different these days is like, you don't necessarily have to write an algorithm. You can simply provide a bunch of context to an agent, and the agent will give you an intelligent answer. And so, as you survey like the space of solutions for whatever problem you're solving, you have this incredibly powerful new way of solving the problems. But you still have to start with like a problem that actually matters.
Walk us through your own development process. We know that this was the inflection point, right? How did you decide what to make agentic and how to package it in this way?
Yeah, so we actually went through a number of iterations with AI and Warp. I think this is instructive because I think it follows kind of like the market as a whole. So even before LLMs and ChatGPT came out, we actually had some AI features in Warp. We had one that would let you like sort of type in English, and in real time we would translate that English into a command. And like, that's kind of the most obvious like way of doing it. Like, so like, it's, if you're a terminal user, you'll realize it's hard to remember commands. Like, how do I search for files on my computer using a command? And so we're like, okay, well, here's an easy solution to that. You type the command you want. You don't type the task, you type the command, and you're like, what's the command for finding files? And it gives you back this thing that's like find -name ... like whatever. And so we started with that. And then when ChatGPT came out, we were like, you know what? There's like a more general purpose thing that would be useful here, where you can just like ask an agent questions and get answers. And we're like, we'll make it really easy to provide context from your terminal session. And so we put a chat panel into Warp. And I think this is like where a lot of app started, it's like, well, okay, it's ChatGPT. It's obvious you can have a conversation with it. What's like a cool lightweight integration? We can get this into our app, and so we did a chat panel. And then the more we thought about it and looked at it, we were like, this is not a native integration to the app. And for our case, there's actually like, a much sort of more native way of integrating the AI. And this is what I would encourage people to think through, which is the terminal or the command line is already oriented around like, it's an interface where you tell the computer what you want it to do, and you just tell the computer what you want it to do in terminal language and computer language. But with LLMs, it turns out you can actually just tell it what you want it to do in English. And so that was like the big unlock for us from a product standpoint, is like, take the native interface of the command line, which is a very powerful interface for like executing things, and just have it execute your English essentially. And that mindset shift, which, we did like a little over a year ago. We actually did it way before all the CLI coding agents, and we actually called it agent mode, which has become we were the first to do that, which has become like a kind of standard name for these features. Yeah. That was like when we first started getting our initial revenue traction, because people were like, okay, this is cool. I'll tell my computer to do things. And that insight, that like very native way of interacting with AI has been just like this front door to all of this other stuff we can do. Because once you have this, way where you're telling the computer what to do, it becomes a question of like, how do you add then the right tools so the computer can actually do what you're asking it to do? And so for us, at first there was only one kind of tool. So in Warp, if you asked an agent to do something, it could just run terminal commands. And that's actually pretty powerful because terminal commands are very flexible. But since then, we've started to add a whole bunch of other tools. So it can like edit files for you. It can like read web pages. It can read files from your file system. And so, but it all took that like main thing of like, okay, what's the right entry point in the app to actually interfacing with an agent in a way that feels natural? And that's been our biggest product unlock.
I think talking to a lot of people who are building AI agent products,
yep,
this is always the thing. There's always this UX challenge around how to deploy the agent correctly for your workflow. Yes. So how would you extract out the learnings you had for like a general purpose? Like, how do I solve these UX challenges around agentic products? What is the right process for me to really deliver an agentic experience that feels integrated?
Yeah, great question. I can just think of some other examples that I think are good to maybe like inform this a bit. Like there's a new set of spreadsheet products that I think are interesting. And so I used to work on, I used to lead the engineering for Google Sheets when I was at Google. And so I've always been, for a long time now, very interested in spreadsheets. And the like, again, the first iteration of AI that I saw in like Google Sheets was like this Gemini button that like sits off in the corner that pops up in a chat panel. And it's like, it's almost like, don't do that. and what I have seen recently, which I think makes much more sense, is the ability to have AI populate cells. And so you're like taking the like fundamental UX of like what the app was already for, which was like, working with data, working with lists, and you're having the insight that, okay, one of the like challenging things about working in this interface is either getting data into it, so you can use AI for that, meaning like I want to have a whole column of where the AI is bringing data into it, or it's working with the data that's already in it. And like, again, you can work with that data by learning a ton of crazy spreadsheet formulas, or what the AI enables is like you to go one level up in abstraction and just say what you want in English. And so any place where the sort of like prior solution involved expressing something complicated using like some sort of, either spreadsheet formulas or code or like a scheduling algorithm, I think that's where you should be looking for like, okay, is there a native way that I can do this with an agent?
Today's episode is brought to you by Vanta. As a founder, you're moving fast toward product market fit, your next round, or your first big enterprise deal. But with AI accelerating how quickly startups build and ship, security expectations are higher earlier than ever. Getting security and compliance right can unlock growth, or stall it if you wait too long. With deep integrations and automated workflows built for fast-moving teams, Vanta gets you audit-ready fast and keeps you secure with continuous monitoring as your models, infra, and customers evolve. Fast-growing startups like LangChain, Writer, and Cursor trusted Vanta to build a scalable foundation from the start. So go to vanta.com/Aakash, that's vanta.com/AAKASH, to save $1,000 and join over 10,000 ambitious companies already scaling with Vanta. Today's episode is brought to you by the experimentation platform Chameleon. 9 out of 10 companies that see themselves as industry leaders and expect to grow this year say experimentation is critical to their business. But most companies still fail at it. Why? Because most experiments require too much developer involvement. Chameleon handles experimentation differently. It enables product and growth teams to create and test prototypes in minutes with prompt-based experimentation. You describe what you want, Chameleon builds a variation of your web page, lets you target a cohort of users, choose KPIs, and runs the experiment for you. Prompt-based experimentation makes what used to take days of developer time turn into minutes. Try prompt-based experimentation on your own web apps. Visit chameleon.com/prompt to join the waitlist. That's KAMELEOON.com/prompt.
And what I would think is like not necessarily the right path is the like, let me put chat in my app path. Because I think the chat is like ChatGPT has that, and the browsers have that, and Siri is going to have that, and like an overlay of chat is like a very kind of thin differentiator or moat, but something that's very deeply like native to the UI of your app, which uses intelligence and might not look exactly like chat, but lets a user express their intent in English or in images or in video, is a really powerful way of like getting the agent natively to help you do whatever your user is trying to do.
And I think this speaks to why AI agents are so powerful, actually, is because they're allowing us to realize the full vision of AI, where we always felt like chat was a limitation on the UX. The agent, you're giving the LLMs tools, you're giving it the ability to plan, think, react.
Yes.
That is allowing you to embed it into your actual normal workflows.
Yeah. I think that's right too. So like another way you can think of it is like, what would you have a human doing for this job? Which is, again, it's a crazy new thought as like someone who's developing products. And you could be like, okay, well, if you had a human to assist you or to assist your user in doing the task, what would be the most useful way that the human could do it? And it could be that the human just like sits over your shoulder like a co-pilot and tells you what to do. But I think a lot of times you'd want to put the human to like work. And, agents are kind of those virtual workers where if you can find a way that they can like do the job in your app, that's going to be really powerful. And you can see this, like, I think if you look at the sectors that have the best product market fit right now for agentic products, it's like coding products like Warp, and it's where the agent is helping write the code, which is what a person might do. And it's like customer service products. So companies like Sierra or Fin or I think Decagon, it's like, and you're literally, for the first time ever, it's like you can have an agent do something that only a human could do before, which, has like some, I share concerns about like replacing people's jobs. That's not where we're not trying to do that. But like as a business owner, I think just having the ability to like be like, okay, I could have something of human-like intelligence, use my tools and help my users. That's really valuable.
So we're talking about the UX of agents, how to integrate it into your product.
Yeah.
There's really no better way to learn than to see, feel, do. So can you show us in action, how should people be using the Warp agent?
Yeah. So when you open up Warp, you'll see something that looks a lot like a command line. And again, if you're a developer and are familiar with the command line, you'll find it pretty, pretty understandable that you can just kind of come in here and run terminal commands. But the big difference in Warp, and the thing that's been the biggest product unlock for us, is that in addition to typing terminal commands, you can just directly type agent queries into the same exact input. So it could be as simple as something as like, tell me about our current repo. I'll just kind of show you how this works. So this is detected as being English rather than a terminal command. When you type something like this, it starts a process of exploration where the agent starts using the tools that it has access to try to, in this case, answer my question. You can see that the primary tools that Warp has access to are basically terminal commands, but it also has access to a bunch of other stuff that I'll show you too. So here, this is like, how would I learn about a new project? I would just ask about it. Before a tool like Warp, I don't really know what I would do. I'd be looking for like a README, but this lets me sort of interactively like explore the code base as I want. Now, I think it's cooler if I can actually show you how I would implement a feature or make a coding change using Warp. And again, this is accessible not just for developers. I know there's a significant PM audience that listens to this podcast. You don't have to even really know how to code to do it. It'll be helpful if you do, but you don't have to. And so the feature that I'm going to build is actually a feature in Warp itself, which is something that probably should already exist but doesn't currently, which is, you'll see when I hover over these buttons here, I get tooltips. That's nice. When I hover over this, our directory picker, I don't. And I feel like that should also have a tooltip, because it's like you don't even know that you can click on it. You can click on it and navigate around and change your directory. So what I'm going to do is have Warp implement that for me. And so the way that I'll do that is I'm actually just going to speak to Warp, and this is how I use agents quite often now. And I'll just reference some context. So for instance, I'll say, can you add a tooltip to our directory picker context chip that says, choose a directory, take a look at the attached screenshot for more context, and I'll tell you what file I think it should be in as well. So I speak to Warp, right? I just say that. I'm going to go ahead and just take a screenshot of this. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding context for the agent, and then I'll also give it a file. So I can just hit the @ key here and reference a file. I don't really like choose a directory. I'm going to change this to something like switch directory.
And using voice dictation for this too.
This is literally what I do as long as I'm not in a public place, is that I just talk to my computer, which is like, it's so crazy how quickly we've gone into like sci-fi, and people, I'm not sure everyone appreciates it. So I'll do this, and as I do that, it starts figuring out what I want to do, and I've just given it like the sort of output that I want here. These models are super smart and can learn your code base, and in our case, this is like a very non-trivial code base. It's over 1 million lines of code, and it's in a kind of hard language that we use here called Rust. And so it's figuring it out. It's reading all of this. It uses these tools, and then it's going to show me the code change here. So it's creating the code change right now. We'll give it a second. No, it's still thinking about it. Give it one more second.
I love watching these things think. It brings me back to my coding days.
Yep. And then, this is weirdly a little bit of like, what coding is like when you're coding with an agent like Warp, is you could just end up sitting here watching it. And so what I will typically do because of that is I'll do multiple things at once, which I could also show you. But here we go. So we have basically it's showing me the code change. I know this code. I think this is basically right. I could go in here if I wanted to. I could actually go ahead and edit this, but I'll just accept it. And then In Warp, we have some really nice features that let you track what the agent is doing as it's doing it. So I can just pop this open over here. And if I wanted the agent to actually go in and change it, I could sort of like, almost do like a code review on the agent's work. But now it's made the change. It's building it for me over here. Again, I haven't touched it. It just knows that after it makes a code change like this for me, that I generally want it built. So this will take a second. And
It's crazy that it knows that though, actually, because we didn't instruct it.
we didn't instruct it. But again, if you're working with these agent tools, one of the product challenges that you're going to want to try and solve is like, how do you make it so that as a user, the user doesn't have to keep repeating themselves? And so there's different techniques for doing this that different products use. So Warp uses, a combination of rules. So rules are sort of like persistent context that the agent has access to. So I may have a rule around after you make a code change, build my code. I can't remember if I have that or if it's just smart enough to do that. Another one is like, you have concepts around like saving and reusing prompts, which are really useful. I'm going to actually see if I do. I'm going to actually just run this directly and just go right to running rather than waiting for it to build. This is going to take a minute. It's possible we'll want to sort of not want people to sit here watching my code build, but if this is what it is like to develop these days. So this is building. Yeah, and so I think figuring out this sort of like memory or learning or how do you make it have the right context is a really cool product challenge. And it's also one of the things that you can do as a product person working in this space to make your product stickier, because the more that it learns and understands your users, the more sort of like the more they'll want to stick with it, the less they'll want to use some tool that doesn't know them as well. So this is building. Give it a second.
And what does that mean, like, sort of tactically and operationally, like making sure that your agent is like understanding your users? Like, what are the things that you're building into your product to make sure that it's doing this correctly?
Yeah, so there's one thing which I can show you while this is building here. I'll go ahead and close this. We have this thing called rules, for instance. And so rules, QC over here. So here's one. Ask me before committing changes. So, agents kind of have non-deterministic behavior where they might start committing changes. They could commit them to the wrong branch. I just want our agent to be very explicit. I want it to always format my code before it pushes it to origin. And so this is a way of like giving like persistent context to the agent so that it knows me. And we have something I think which is cooler than this even, which is like one step up, where we will suggest these rules for people. So let's see. So here we go. It built it. Do you see it?
Yeah. Wow. We have the tooltip. Like,
we have the tooltip, and I could be like, you know what? I want it left aligned. Like I could, a typical flow for me, and this is how I do all of my development these days, is I just start with a prompt, and then I look at it, and I'm like, this looks pretty good, but maybe it could be better. And then I will reprompt and reiterate until I have the agent get me to a point where I'm happy with it. And then I will have the agent actually review its own code, and then I'll have the agent, basically push the commit so someone else on my team can look at it. But I'm like very, very tightly coupling, with it to get to a point where it did what I want. So anyhow, this is quick kind of overview of Warp. Anything else I could show you in it?
That's amazing. So how does Warp use Warp? What are the advanced tactics people can use to supercharge their productivity?
Yeah. Do you want me to stop sharing or just kind of keep this?
Keep sharing, yeah.
Keep sharing.
I think
Okay.
for like this whole like next 4 or 5 sections, even if not much is going on screen, we'll just keep the screen share.
Okay. I mean, if you want, I can also like have other things going in the background.
Yeah. Well, I think like one of the things you can talk about is right now is like having multiple agents doing things at once. So that's something you could demo, for instance. Today's episode is brought to you by Amplitude. Building great digital products is hard. You know that better than anyone. Getting teams aligned, measuring what matters, and scaling your product strategy isn't easy. But what if you had a clear framework to guide your next steps? That's exactly what Amplitude built. They studied the best product teams to understand what really drives impact and turn those insights into the Digital Experience Maturity Assessment. In 2 minutes, you'll be able to see where your team stands and what you can improve to build better products faster. Click the link in the caption to take the free assessment and get a clear path to product growth. AI evals are one of the most important skills for PMs, and I know you know they matter. The question is, are you doing them right? Most teams are winging it with basic metrics and hoping for the best. Meanwhile, the teams that actually ship reliable AI, they've cracked the code on systematic evaluation. Today's episode is brought to you by the AI Evals for Engineers and PMs course by Hamal Hussain and Shreya Shankar. This live Maven course will teach you the battle-tested frameworks from Hamal and Shreya, who are the engineers behind GitHub Copilot's evaluation system and 25 plus production AI implementations. 4 weeks, live instruction. Next cohort starts July 21st. Start shipping AI that actually works. Enroll at maven.com with my code AG-product-growth for over $800 off. That's AG-PRODUCT-GROWTH.
Yeah. So actually, how about before I answer this question on how Warp uses Warp, let's say I want to actually be doing, other, multiple things with agents. So I have this agent here that just did this tooltip. Let's say that I also want to have an agent kind of go and like fetch yesterday's feedback from GitHub. So this is like a kind of cool thing because it's not about necessarily building an app, but it's like just showing how general purpose agents can really help your workflow. And we have like a lot of people who use Warp for this kind of thing. So I would be like, can you use the GitHub CLI to fetch yesterday's new GitHub issues and sort and summarize them, pull out themes for me? This should be the Warp public GitHub repo. So I'll start this agent and then I'll answer your question. So Warp, at Warp, we are using Warp to build Warp, which again, I think if you are building an AI product, you really want to dog food it. And so dog food's like a core principle of how we get the product to be something that's useful. We and me specifically, I've set up a bunch of guidelines, which are it's sort of like, we call it the coding mandate, where we ask for Warp engineers to start every coding task with a prompt. And they don't necessarily have to finish it with a prompt, because the sort of state of the art where we're at with agentic development right now is like, there are definitely a class of problems which are too complicated, or you could just do it faster if you just do it on your own. So I don't force like getting all the way to a completed task with a prompt. But what we do ask then is like for folks after they start with a prompt, if they're not able to finish the task, to share feedback. And so that feedback just goes into we have like 5 Slack channels, which are for different kinds of feedback that developers encounter as they're trying to build Warp using Warp. And it could be like, hey, the agent got confused doing X, or, the agent, I tried to sort of like do a code review with the agent and it didn't do it. And so people are constantly sharing this feedback, which I think is really important. And conversely, we ask people to also share when it is able to do it, which is an increasing percentage of the time. We have this channel called it's called Warp.dev, where we ask people to share looms of like, show the agent doing a completed task. And then what's cool about that is that becomes content which can be shared out to the world, whether it's on our social, or sometimes we'll put these on our YouTube channel. And it's really, really powerful as a way of educating current users, prospective users, just people who are interested in general in terms of agentic development, on like how to do it successfully and what the key aspects of like the prompting and the context are to get to something that works. And there is, by the way, there's quite a bit of skill in it. Like, you need to you know actually, like, the best thing is like if you can tell the agent how to do the task, not just the outcome that you want. But like there's skill in what context you provide. There's skill in like, can you come up with a good plan with the agent? And it's very similar to like working with a kind of junior engineer on the team. And so showing these examples, and people are really interested in the world right now in terms of like, how do I use agents to do my own job? So there's a lot of appetite for that type of content.
Love that. So, how does Warp compare to the competition like Cursor, Claude Code, Gemini CLI?
Yeah, so that you said the competition correctly. So there's sort of two buckets of competition that we look at. So there's apps like Cursor or maybe Windsurf. I don't know what Windsurf's current state is, but like those are IDEs and they tend to be forks of VS Code, and so they actually all have a very, very similar interface where most of the real estate of the app is something that looks like Microsoft Word. It's like really geared towards writing code by hand, and then you'll have a chat panel on the side. And that chat panel can do stuff. Obviously, it's not just like a read-only chat panel, but it's still to my point earlier, it feels to me, and I'm biased here, but it feels like a kind of a bolt-on experience to an old style app. And then the other type of app that is really catching on right now is a pure CLI app. And just to show, like, I think for people watching this, it could be interesting to see. So the pure CLI app is something like Claude, where you run it. You can actually run it from within Warp, and it has like a similar interface to Warp, actually, where you get like this input box and you can tell it to do stuff. But because it's a terminal app and not like the actual terminal, you don't get the same type of user experience that we can provide, where you actually have a GUI that like will, show you all of your changes and like let you like search for files to open and edit files. And so it's like Warp in a similar interaction pattern, but it's not as rich of an experience. And so, the way that we are trying to differentiate is by building a totally different kind of app. Like I, sort of said earlier, it's like we call it an agentic development environment, where we are basically trying to support what we think the new workflow should be from ground up product principles. And so I think the new workflow is like, as a developer, you start with a prompt, but you probably want to do some amount of hand editing for when that prompt gets stuck. You want to be able to quickly see all of the diffs. You want to be able to like reference those diffs easily for a feedback loop. And so Warp is kind of in its own class here in terms of where it sits to these CLI apps and IDEs, which is very, very cool, and I think is a big opportunity, but also like it isn't. There are product challenges and trade-offs, just to be clear about that. But yeah, that's how Warp is kind of neither a CLI app nor an IDE. It's like its own thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of really good nuggets in there for people trying to build agentic products, right? You don't want to build a Me Too product that all of a sudden the foundational model company is just creating and
exactly.
builds. Or you don't want to create something that is just a bolt-on of an old interface that just feels like you shoved a chatbot in. Like, the whole lesson we're trying to teach people is you want to think from ground up principles. What is the new workflow with agents, and then build for that new workflow.
I mean, that is exactly how I express it now, how I think about it, and why I'm like bullish on our position in the market here. And I think, if you're going into a very, very competitive crowded space like AI coding, I think differentiation is a very important thing that you should be thinking about. And so I do think Warp is one of one in our approach here. We're not the other things. Now there's challenges with that as well, but I think if I'm working on something and I want to be working on it for a really long time, to me it's like the coolest and most powerful and most useful thing that we could do is actually try to build the best possible app for supporting what this new workflow is.
So how did you think about onboarding people into this workflow? Like what are the areas where you architected that to make sure that people actually activate? Because that's almost always the most important experience, is that first run product experience.
It's an awesome question, and has been something that we've iterated on a ton throughout Warp's history. I can tell you one thing that was like a big unlock, and actually I can show it because I think it's cooler to show it. So the principle, let me clear my screen here. The principle was, so we had a lot of people who were downloading Warp, intending to use it as a terminal, which is fine. Like that's what Warp was like early in its existence. And we were like, how do we get people to experience an aha moment with Warp as an agent? And so I'll tell you things that didn't really work that we tried, and then I can tell you things that have worked that we've tried. So stuff that just doesn't move the needle in my experience is like a kind of warm welcome screen or like a guided product tour. Maybe it works for some amount of user education. Those tours with like the flashing lights that take you like here and like all across your product. Though that didn't really work for us, nor did like changing any copy really work for us, or putting different buttons or entry points on the screen didn't really work for us. What worked for us is something that catches a user at the moment where we think our agent could be useful and helps them accomplish a task with the agent. So let me see if I could find a way to give a good demo of this. So if I were to like go over here and let's see if I do this. Yeah, perfect. So I tried to check out our master branch here and I got an error, right? And it says like, if I did this, it would be overridden by checkout. And then it gives me this message, please commit your changes or stash them before you switch branches. And so like, if I know what I'm doing as a developer, it's like, oh, okay, I need to commit or not. If I don't know what I'm doing, I might be like, what? And like, this extends to very complicated situations. And so what we started showing was this thing here where we guess what the next action ought to be of the user and surface it with like a single action. And what's cool about this is when I go into this, I immediately get into the agent flow. And so now I'm like, probably for the first time, I'm seeing like, oh, wait a second, Warp can just like use an agent to fix my thing for me, right? Is this cool? And I'm like, okay. And now, even better, it's engaging me in a conversation here. So I'll be like, okay, wait a second, I just type English into this. So I'll be like, commit the changes. And I'm like, is this going to work? And then I type it, and it just does it. And so something like this, where you catch someone in the moment, this was a really big unlock for us. This was probably our first sort of like inflection on the agent side, was when we added this. Does this make sense, what I'm showing you?
This is a huge unlock. I want to just double click on the learning for folks, right? Throw out your old guided tours, your like tool tips, your gamified onboarding, right? When we're talking about agentic products, we're thinking about how can we get them into that flow when it's going to be useful for them, and surfacing it for them, right? And giving them that aha moment that, oh, it can do this. And it's not about shoving it in your face with some copy or something like that. It's actually, while they're working, suggesting to them. So it's almost like you're brainstorming what they should use the agent for, and you're showing it to them.
That was and like another way of thinking about this is we were like, what's the version of autocomplete for agentic work, because I do think one of the magical things about the first generation of AI products is just like autocomplete is such a easy feature to use, because it's like it's all upside. It doesn't slow you down, and it's easy to ignore, but it's there if you want it. It only takes like one keystroke to use it. And so we were like, okay, what's the kind of like we could literally do autocomplete, and we do autocomplete, but like, what's the prediction of when a person is going to get the most value out of an agent? And again, what's cool about this? So the thing that drives that prediction is intelligence. And so, we are able to sort of understand, okay, this is an error that someone has where it would probably be useful for us to suggest what a next step is for them to fix it. And that suggestion can educate them on how to like use the agent, and it will actually solve a real problem for them. And so, yeah, that's like, that feature I think is like kind of the coolest, thing. And it really did move the needle. It like really upped people's engagement with the agent. And like, people will hit that when they are in like horrible state of frustration and have been like, Googling for fixes to things that they've been working on. And they'll see that thing come up, and maybe they'll be like, this thing looks like Clippy. Is this going to actually work? But the difference is like, it works these days. And so, it's been a really, really big unlock. So I would definitely encourage people to think of like, what are the assistive things in the moment where you can get people to, really adopt the agentic workflow in your tool, whatever that tool is.
So as you were rolling out these agentic features, obviously,
Yep.
You measure any product feature towards some of your key North Star metrics. We saw it did eventually move revenue and users,
Yep.
but you probably also moved like the amount of code and interaction they were having with the product. But what are the things specifically for agentic features that you need to measure that are different from your average product features?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that we focus on is engagement. And you could think of that in terms of like what like breadth of engagement or depth of engagement. The thing that's going to lead in general to, I think, sort of paid conversion is like depth of engagement, meaning like is the best sign that we have that someone is going to become a paid user is that they are doing long conversations with the agent, long tasks with the agent on a relatively frequent basis. There's other things that we will look at too. I don't think that the product metrics are all that different. Like we'll look at like how many lines of code is an agent writing for someone. And then we'll look at like, more qualitative signals as well, like NPS, and like we will survey our users and that type of stuff. You can look at retention, like retention and engagement. Retention is another big one, and we want to see over time on a cohort basis that the retention of people trying and using the AI features is going up. And so we're getting that. That's pretty cool. I think we also want to see that sort of like smile, meaning like people who might have tried the AI earlier are coming back to it and like using it more, which means like, again, like the product itself is getting more valuable and the user behavior that we care about is changing. So those are the biggest ones.
And there's a lot of talk about AI evals, and I think for agents, the evals are particularly important because you don't want it to go and suddenly delete their production database, which was like a big thing that everyone talked about with Replit or something like that. So how do you think about the eval testing suite, those offline metrics?
Yeah, so this is a huge deal. So we when we first brought our agent to market, we did it really fast. And I think that was the right thing. It was like, let's see if there's demand for this, and like, let's put the agent in the app. We didn't do evals even to start. We were just like, do people want to work in this way? Does it help them? Then we were like, okay, people want to work this way, but it's very, very frustrating when it doesn't work. And so it's a new type of building stuff where there's this element of non-determinism in it, right? Which is, again, if you've spent most of your career building SaaS apps, that's just not the case. Like, you build something, you bug bash it, you put it in front of testers, you can observe like the crash rate or whatever, but like the thing is coded and it does what you want it to do. With AI-based features or agent-based features, like they kind of have a mind of their own. So yeah, if you want to really improve it, you have to measure. And so we started investing in evals. I think there's different kinds of evals for the coding space. There happen to be some like well-known public ones like SweBench and Terminal Bench, and we decided to invest in those because there it's like that's awesome. There's a pre-built set of things that we can see how good our agent is against them, and the performance of the agent. Also, I think this is an important thing to make clear for people building is not just the model. Like the model is an input, and like if you're using Claude or using OpenAI or Gemini or whatever, you do get different performance characteristics, but the actual performance of the agent is a function of the model plus the prompt plus the context plus you might use multiple models. You might have to do things where you like summarize or compact the context window or truncate context. And so there's actually a lot of engineering that goes into like getting the most out of the model. But anyway, so we started working against these public benchmarks. That was really helpful for us, and it actually was helpful not just from like an improve our product standpoint, but it was helpful from a marketing standpoint. Like we got to actually be, and are still are, the top agent on Terminal Bench, and we're top 5 agent on SweBench, and that gives us a whole bunch of credibility. So we did the public evals, and then we've also invested in our own internal evals, where the way to think of these evals is like, you present the agent with a task, you present it with some sort of like acceptance criteria. So it's kind of like writing a test, and you have to build a sort of harness where the agent can like try to do the task, and you can evaluate whether or not it was successful. And you're going to need to build infrastructure for that, or there are companies out there that will provide this infrastructure as a service, and we've done some combination of each of these. But then you do that, and then the other thing that you want to do is like you should, I believe, have some evals that fail. Meaning, like if you're passing 100% of your evals, you won't really know over time if you're improving. So it's a little bit unlike adding like regression tests or something like that, in the sense of like, if you want to measure your progress over time, you should be having evals that some of them fail. And then in addition to doing like sort of these offline evals, you want to do something where, if you can, you are looking at real user data in the wild, and looking at sort of like anonymized conversations or something like that, where you're trying to understand, are there common patterns where people are failing using your agent? Are there common patterns where the agent's really successful and you might want to market that? And so like I think it's a big data feedback loop that you want to put in place.
So as I previewed at the beginning, some people are making money with agents. You guys have figured out how to do it. Others are lost. So who's actually winning, and what business model innovations work for agentic products?
Yeah, great question. So let me think about how to answer this. So I think like, the first thing that you want is you want willingness to pay. If you don't have willingness to pay, you're going to have a problem, because these, the LLMs cost a lot of money. So I would start with that. The second thing that you're going to want is retention. And so we're in a time where I think there's a lot of like people kicking the tires on a lot of different agentic apps. And so, you want to make sure you're keeping revenue you're getting, and that you're, on a cohort basis improving. The third thing is margins. And this is probably the hardest thing if you're at the app layer right now. It's, I think, notoriously hard for agentic coding companies, in the sense of like, just a very expensive service to run. And what's particularly challenging, and you'll see this with Warp and with Claude and Cursor, and like everyone is trying to figure out how to price this stuff. So like the typical SaaS pricing mechanism of a fixed price per seat subscription I think it just doesn't work that well with agents because people use these things in kind of a highly variable amount. You really want something where as the usage grows, you make more money, not less. So that's like a problem with these fixed price subscriptions, which by the way, Warp has. So we have these fixed price subscriptions. And it's like we're in this awkward position where it's like the more someone uses it, the more it costs us. And so you can end up being in a spot with your business model where you're trying to make money off of like the breakage, like the unused part of the subscription. And so this kind of stinks. So you want to, again, it's like we're iterating on this. On the flip side, the consumer expectation is often a fixed price subscription. And if you do a pure usage based thing, which is kind of the obvious solution to this, then you end up in this weird place where the consumer is kind of like always like watching their meter and like feeling like I don't want to spend more money on this thing. And so this is like the art of it. And so right now, our kind of best guess on this is like a fixed price subscription plus an overages model that is more usage based. I don't know where it will totally land. Now, there are better ways to do this. If you are in a business where you are less about like improving productivity, but you have a more measurable outcome, especially one where it's an outcome that the agent can do on its own, like resolving a customer service ticket, then you're in a very, very cool spot because you can do something closer to outcome-based pricing where you charge for something that's much closer to the value that's being provided. In the coding world, it's just really hard to do that. Like, like lines of code created is a famously horrible proxy for how much value an engineer is creating. Yeah. And so like, it's really hard to measure. And so you end up, charging based on like, how much people want to use it. And so usage is closer. But yeah, that's like the challenge of pricing. And then there's this other challenge, which I think is really interesting, which is like, where's the value accrue in the stack? And so, you have LLM providers who are, so actually just going all the way down, you have apps that are paying LLM providers, that are paying hyperscalers, that are paying NVIDIA. Yeah. It's kind of like how I would look at it. And so NVIDIA is doing really quite well. And like everyone takes some margin. And so the question is like, who's going to be able to capture the margin? And like, I think it has to do with where is there going to be differentiated value. And, right now in the coding space, there is differentiated value at the model layer. Like I would say at this very moment in time, probably Anthropic has the strongest models, although GPT-5 is really quite good and like is competitive. Gemini at the moment, like they're going to release something, I'm sure it will be competitive. But the more that there's a competitive dynamic at the model layer, the stronger the position of the app providers. The more that the more that a model provider has like sort of like a real differentiated advantage in a particular vertical with their model, kind of like Anthropic and coding, they sort of get something closer to like, pricing power. And that's a difficult spot to be in. So, I've said this before publicly, I'll say it again. It's in our best interest that there's like a competitive model provider layer. Even that there would be open source models is really that are competitive would completely change the dynamic. But even just having like something where it's competitive at the layer of like G-Cloud, AWS, and Azure are competitive, like there's not like one cloud hosting provider, that puts enough downward pressure that I think at the app level you can build something that has differentiated value.
Mm-hmm. I think the Information released a crazy chart which looked at gross profit, and I don't think they were able to verify all the accounting, but yeah, at the high level it was like Anthropic 50%, OpenAI 45%, And as you move more towards the app layer, like a lovable, it almost gets down to like 20%. Is that Grok? Do you think that those numbers are probably accurate?
I think that's today's world. I believe that the model providers are taking more margin than the apps built on top of them. But I don't think that that's necessarily a forever thing. I think there's one other dynamic which is at play, which is that over time, and I think it's something like in the last year, like the cost per token at any given level of intelligence has gone down by like 100x. Like I'm it's either 10x or 100x, and I think it's 100x. And so it just depends. If that's the case, again, then there will be value at different layers. If someone's able to maintain like a durable lead at the model layer, then I think they're going to get a big portion of the profits. But I think it's more likely, just honestly, even putting my bias aside, that it turns more into like at the model layer, it's all about scale, and like the margin is like slightly lower. And at the app layer, it's like differentiated value, moat, like, do you have, switching costs, those types of things that get you lasting value. But I don't know. It's changing really fast. Like, I think the answer to this question, like a year ago, I was going back and listening to some podcast, was like app layer, and like models are commodity. And now it's like, I think it's more like model layer, but I would just focus on building something that people find useful, want to pay real money for, and that the important thing is that there's margin somewhere right now. Like if there's no margin in any place in this whole business stack, I would say find a different thing to work on. And that would be like the Uber and Lyft situation, where I think the margins are sort of fundamentally limited by like, well, what do you have to pay a driver per hour? And like, there's no more efficiency that you're getting out of that. Whereas for us, it's like, the actual, it's some combination of software and hardware, but fundamentally it's like efficiency of compute. And that's a thing that historically is like gotten way better over time.
Yeah, we've seen it just get way better. That cost per token at that particular intelligence level, that's the most telling.
Yeah.
So where is all this heading? Like, what's your most contrarian take about the future of AI agents that other founders would disagree with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's three phases, and I'll speak to the coding world if that's okay. But I bet you this is true in other domains as well. So the first phase was autocomplete, and like Cursor crushed it. Like even before Cursor, there was Copilot, which was a good product, but frankly, I love that a startup came along and was just like, we're gonna do this way better. And like basically literally the difference between Cursor and Copilot is that Cursor suggestions are faster and better. And it's crazy to me that they just like outcompeted Microsoft on that. But that was phase one. I think we're in phase two right now, which is what I would call interactive agents. And so these are agents where a person behind a keyboard is saying, do this, do that, make this change for me, solve this, debug this server crash for me. And it's really like a human orchestrator. And I think we're early in that phase. I don't think that that's like, if you survey most developers in the world, maybe they've tried to do this a little bit. I don't think it's their bread and butter workflow, but I think over the next year, the majority of development tasks are going to start with a prompt, which is a pretty crazy change. Like, keep in mind, I've been doing this for like 20 years, and I've always, for 19 of them, when I wanted to build something, I would just like open up my code editor and start typing. And now I'm just like, you saw me, I'm literally speaking to Warp, which is crazy. And then I think phase three is kind of like real automation of some subset of simpler tasks. And again, I think you'll probably see this pattern in I don't know, I'm going to say like legal tech. Like it's probably right now, like the state of the art legal thing is probably like someone using Harvey and like being like, summarize these documents for me or draft this contract for me. And there's a person driving it. But I think that the step that comes after is like, okay, I don't know, lawsuit was filed. An agent's going to start doing discovery or something like that. Or like, I think that will happen. When that happens, I don't know what it means for knowledge work. Like, I don't really believe the timing estimates. So like I listened to a podcast with a couple folks from Anthropic, and they were like, there's not gonna be any knowledge workers in like 3 years or something. I was like, I don't think so. I don't agree with that, because I think there's an underestimation of how difficult it is in certain industries to deploy technology. So like in healthcare or whatever, I don't think it's going to be all agents. But I think that you will see in some in some areas of knowledge work, specifically at startups and in non-regulated industries, it's going to be super disruptive. And I guess that's not a super contrarian take, but like I don't think people get it. Like, I live in like for most of the year these days, I'm living in New Mexico, and I don't think most people in like my town know what like an AI agent is, and I don't think that's going to last for that long.
Yeah, it's actually crazy how low the adoption and awareness of AI agents is for people like you and I who are just living and breathing this. I asked PMs, like, how many of you are using an AI agent in your day-to-day work, which is a little different than developing AI agent products, which is what we're talking about today. But
Yeah.
2% of PMs are using AI agents to improve their work.
Yeah, that's going to change. I don't think it speaks to two things. So one, it speaks to like me and you are in some crazy tech bubble where all we talk about all day long is AI agents, which is, it makes sense given what we do. But it also, I just think it speaks to like how early we are in the game of like this stuff truly being deployed. But I don't know, like I'm not like a big like hype guy, but I am like this is like a very fundamental, foundational new technology that humanity has discovered, and like it's gonna change our lives. Even if like we don't get whatever AGI or ASI very soon, it's like it's already like the power of these models to do really useful stuff is very, very high.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, as a content trend, I had hopped on many different content trends over my content writing junior journey, whether it was crypto or
Right.
NFTs or metaverse. After having gotten burned by all of those, it's like, oh, AI is another one of those. But it's obviously proven itself not to be.
It's not.
In the past 2 years. And
Yeah.
a lot of PMs are now sold on this. They've watched, they've listened to us for an hour. For a PM who wants to skill up, like,
Yep.
they want to build like a 90-day roadmap to get better at building agentic products, what should they do?
So first of all, they should like get hands-on in a tool. I mean, obviously I'm biased towards Warp, and Warp is great for this, but like it doesn't have to be Warp. You will be amazed what you can do by simply telling a tool to do it. And so a really cool way of doing this is to like, instead of writing a PRD for your next thing that you are, product managing, or maybe there's a thing that you think the team should work on and people aren't even bought in, maybe build it, or build like a simple version of it or a lo-fi version of it. We've had this happen on our team a bunch with our designer, who's awesome. And like, there have been times where we were like, you know what, building that thing is going to be such a pain in the ass. We're not going to build it right now. And this was like, we wanted to build like a better like natural language classifier in Warp, which is like not a simple thing to build. And our designer, he knows like how to code like a little. Like, I don't think he'd be offended if I said that. He's not like an expert coder, but he was like, you know what? He's like fearless. He's like, I'm going to sit there with Warp and I'm going to like do it until I have a prototype version of it that I can prove to the engineering team can actually be better than what we currently have. And he did it, and it was crazy. And so it's such a like empowering thing that like my first step would be like, try and build something with the technology. The other reason to do that is like, it will give you a feel for what is and isn't possible, which will inform the types of features that you are advocating for people to build. Meaning, like, you want to build like a really, really good instinct, like around like, how good are these models, for instance? What can agents do? Like, can they actually like, organize your calendar, or are they going to do some really stupid stuff? And like the way that you can get that feel is by using them in a very interactive context in your day to day. So highly recommend that.
Couldn't endorse that advice anymore. This has been a masterclass. Thank you so, so much, Zach.
Thank you for having me, Akash. This was really, really awesome and really fun to come on. So thanks again.
All right, everybody. Agentic AI, you have me saying it, is the #1 trend right now that you need to learn as a product manager. Warp is proof. They're adding 1 million ARR every 10 days. We have made the playbooks public in this episode. Go act on this. Like and subscribe for more complete courses on AI product development, and we'll see you in the next one.
Amazing. Thank you.
I really hope you guys enjoyed that episode. It would mean a ton to me and the team if you could please subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple and Spotify podcasts, and leave a rating and review. Those ratings and reviews really help grow the show and help other people discover the show. And they help fund the production so that we can do bigger and better productions. Can't wait to share the next episode with you. Until then, see you later.